Welcome again for this webinar that is the second of the series on Champions of the Future, winning at all costs, the paradigm that we see. And in order to get started and probably to do a little bit of a warming up, I'm going to throw a few polls, a few questions at you, and I ask you to respond to some questions, and feel free to add some additional comments in the chat box that you have. So if you are all ready, you will see a first poll on your screen, which asks, do you have a sustainability plan or sustainability strategy as organization, or the event that you are representing, the event you're working with? Something you have done and dusted, nicely published on the website, or it's something you're working on, or probably you don't know. Again, no right and wrong answer. It is something that it's good for us to know. A lot of people working on it. Probably, I mean, we'll hear from Damian and Alexandra later, but it's probably never finished. I mean, you always keep working on your plan, you always keep tweaking and updating and improving, but it's good to see that there's at least half of you are working on it. Would be interesting if someone brave enough to say, I don't know actually if we have a plan. Again, it's not a bad answer, but it's just good to know, because it can be reality. Okay, another 10 seconds. There's still a handful of people who haven't voted yet. I'll close the poll. Damian, Alexandra, I think you can also vote if you want. I mean, Damian, I think if you said you don't know if you have any sustainability plan, we're going to kick you out of the call straight away. Okay. That's it. 50%, exactly 50% of you are working on it. 50% is working on it, and roughly 1/3 says, yes, we have one internally, and only a very few say we have published it on the website, and one of you says, no, we actually don't have one. None of you said, I do not know. A last question. What works best for you in your program? What are the best leverage if you really want to accelerate, if you really want to make progress? Top-down support, athletes, sponsors, partners, an internal champion, someone internally who's really kind of pushing everything forward? Or is it your league, your governing body, an IUC for some of us, or something else? And again, feel free to type it in the chat box. Again, this is something that is just useful for us to know. And it's actually also interesting to get a feel, because we have two athletes here that obviously are very much championing the subject. But it's good to get a feel from all of you coming from different organizations, what you feel is good to see. So far we see that sponsors and partners is a big topic, top-down support from management. They're fighting for the first place. There's a bit of a split, equally split between athletes, internal champions, and push from leagues or governing bodies. 10 more seconds probably, make your choice, and then we'll show the results. Alexandra, what did you vote?
I like to always go for the athletes and ambassadors.
You have to. Okay, here we go with the results. It's been an equal between top-down support and sponsors or partners. Probably they can also be non-for-profit partners. I know a lot of you working with, for example, some UN organizations or charities or NGOs that help you push athletes, internal sustainability champions, and push from leagues or internal governing bodies are equal. So that gives us a bit of idea. So thank you very much for that. And for those of you who joined in the meantime, sorry for missing some of the questions, but we just got a bit of a feel from who we have on the call now. This call is not about SandSI, but it's organized by SandSI. This call is about sailing, sustainability, and getting things done. And really for you, from whatever sport you're representing, to really get a feel of the different steps, and also to ask your questions and to get some input on specific comments that you have. I already see some questions coming up in the Q&A. Feel free to type up any questions you have either in the Q&A or in the chat box, and we'll try to take them along the way and I'll try to do my best to keep my friends Alexandra and Damian to the certain amount of time so that we have time for questions towards the end. Very briefly, if you don't know, SandSI Sport Sustainability International, we're a membership organization based in Geneva who seeks to accelerate sustainability in and through sport, really focusing on 3 topics: climate, waste, and health. And here you can see a selection of our members. All I want to say, without going into details of all the logos, is that our members are coming from sport and non-sport entities, both more like event organizers or suppliers, and a good number of students, athletes, para-athletes, professionals working in the field or simply interested in the field. What do? We do webinars, we do different things, concretely combined into 2 programs. One is called Football for Climate, which obviously focuses more on the sport of football, to really using the power of that sport and the specificities, and also with athletes to push forward the topic within the sport itself. The second one is SDG Sport Lab, which is more a creative platform where we do webinars, organizations, and this is part of it as well, this webinar, to concretely encourage the debate and support initiatives around the contribution of sport to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which, as we all know, has a lot of potential. So having said all of that, I'm going to stop talking and asking you difficult questions, and I would like to hand over the floor to Alexandra and Damian to take us through some of the things they would like to share with us.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us today. Basically, obviously, this has been a 2-part webinar, and just to introduce myself, I'm Alexandra Rickham. I sailed for 10 years as part of the British sailing team, or the Paralympic team. Since leaving sailing, I am working as a sustainability consultant with a focus on sports. I currently work for Sail GP, which is a global sailing league, so very much focusing on the implementation of sustainability on the ground at events and within the teams. And yeah, and so today Damian's gonna give us a little bit of an intro to what we covered last time, and then we'll move straight into kind of how do we embed these tools kind of more so from the 11th hour perspective, and what they're doing with their team as part of the ocean race, and also how we can apply that to events of any sport and any team.
Thanks, Alexandra. Thanks, Geert. This is great to be back again. And let's see if I've got control here. We click that next slide forward. So I think the topic over these 2 webinars is the paradigm shift between looking at the definition of winning, and we explored that in our last webinar. I think now what we want to do is dig into it a little bit and really practically, how can we redefine winning in the context of sustainable development and sustainable sport. So I've got a great partner to keep me on my toes. Alexandra is going to be asking me questions as we explore the 11th hour racing team journey, which ultimately started 2 ocean races ago. Mark Towell and Charlie Enright have put together 3 ocean race campaigns. This is the 3rd. That's the best part of 8 years. We're working in the arena of sailing. It's a global sport. It's a sport that sends us offshore, and we leave the dock with very finite resources, and we have to survive within the parameters of the boat and the resources that we take offshore. But first of all, we have to get there. And I think this is, in some ways, we're a microcosm of the broader world and industry. The materials, the components, the boats, the sails, and all the resources that go into putting those machines on the water has an impact. It can have a positive impact, and it can have clearly a negative impact. And our challenge now is to recognize, assess, analyze those impacts and issues, and to find solutions for them. And this is where I think sailing has really something to offer, because just like other technical sport, we're based on innovation and technology. 100% of our effort in terms of design and innovation is spent on the search for performance. And what we now need to do is divert a certain part of that effort and resources, human and otherwise, in the innovation space and look for sustainable solutions. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a great challenge, and let's dig into it. Oh, we've gone too far. And so I think, that was a great poll to start with. There are a couple of really good polls there. And I have to say, I think I ticked a few boxes when we talked about who are the real influencers in this space. And I did tick, I think the first one I ticked was the top-down approach. I think it's really, we all have a role to play, but it really requires strong leadership and very clear vision. In the sporting space, we all recognize this, and we talked about this in the last webinar. In the sustainability space, it's crucial to know where you're going, to understand the landscape, to understand the issues that we want to tackle. And so I really feel that clearly on the bottom left there, we've got Jeremy from 11th Hour Racing, our primary partner, and Mark and Charlie, the two campaign founders. And so they're setting the vision for the full team. And of course, it requires uptake from everyone within the team, and of course, therefore, bottom up. And ultimately, what we want to do is collaborate with the industry and with the race, the ocean race, and with the class and the IMOCA class to change policy. And so that's where I think the governing bodies have a hugely important role to play. And then as athletes, our role is to inspire a new vision, I guess, a new vision of what sport means, and to be coherent, because when we, as an organization or as a team or a yacht club, decide to start on the sustainability journey, we need to represent a coherent image externally, and therefore this is where the athletes have a hugely important role to play. So I also agree with Alexandra. Being an athlete, we're part of the solution.
Yep.
Does that sound right, Alex?
I think so. I think so. I think, I was just saying that really to play ball, because I think that athletes have a responsibility, and I think also I want them to feel empowered to be able to stand up and speak about it. But the reality is that I think a lot of the time it does need to come from top down. If you can't get buy-in from your CEO or the head of your sailing club or the head of your football club or whatever it is, then actually it just makes it, you spend a lot of time banging your head against a wall, because if that person deems it as important, then also suddenly the availability of funds and access and actually getting stakeholders on board from there, it makes it a lot easier. It's never going to be 100% easy, most likely, but at least it's a lot easier.
Yeah, clearly. And I think there was another box there, which was internal champion. And this is clearly a very important space, because once the vision has been defined, or maybe it's the champion, from bottom up, from within the organization, you've got someone who suddenly arrives and, we got to do this. It's infectious, and the snowball starts to grow. And clearly having the internal champion who's not just going to talk about it, but do it. And this is where implementing a green team, blue team, call it what you like, having a, in the yacht club context, we have commodores and treasurers, but, what about the sustainability officer, the green team, who's actually going to do this work? So we're very lucky to have that within our team, 11th Hour Racing. It's one of our primary deliverables for the campaign, as well as performance. And so we're a small, big team of 3 at the moment. But more importantly, we've managed to engage all of the team to consider that sustainability is part of what everyone is doing. So honestly, sustainability is all of us from our 11th Hour Racing team perspective. We recognize that our work with 11th Hour Racing, our sponsor, into this second ocean race campaign is very unique. It allows us a very unique opportunity to apply embed sustainability, hopefully at a level of excellence which will lead the way. and continue to lead the way in the space of sailing. And so as we do our own work, and this is a mind map, if you like, of establishing a comprehensive sustainability plan. But as we do this work for ourselves, we are also now in the process of creating the TOOLBOX, which is a framework based on the IOC Essentials as one example, but other world sustainability standards, which will help to provide a pathway for other teams and other organizations. Clearly, we're in the sailing space, but it's equally relevant in any sport, and certainly anyone in the sustainability space, whether it's a sporting body or a company, will recognize this map. But it's really very much about defining the starting point. Who are we? Understanding, coming together around a common vision and mission, engaging the stakeholders internally and externally to basically identify the issues that are associated with the plans, right? So we're entering the ocean race. We're going to be putting a boat on the water, supported by, sailed by a group of sailors, supported by a full shore team. What are the issues and what are the challenges and what are the opportunities associated with that? So we've analyzed and defined all of those, set some targets, and where possible, align those targets with pre-existing benchmarks, and then make plans basically for implementing them. So when we've set out the vision, some of those plans and some of those objectives will have been already decided. So we're looking to be climate positive. We want to communicate widely with a broad audience using the ocean race as a world sporting platform. We want to certainly be single-use plastic free. And we need to track the progress as we implement those plans from a quarterly, annual basis. And as we go through various phases of our campaign, so we're in a training phase right now. We're in the phase of preparing the boat, the race boats, and the race team. And then the last phase, of course, the event itself. And so as we go from one cycle to another, some of these plans will become more or less important. And we need to track that progress. And what's really interesting, I think, with this campaign that Mark and Charlie put together, it's the third of 3 ocean race campaigns. We have some previous benchmarks. We're now establishing some really coherent data, which gives us a very good idea of the footprint of what we're doing in offshore sailing and in the sport of sailing. And we believe that the establishment of, really clear benchmark and this process of tracking our data and reporting it externally will really help to drive positive change through policy, through best practices with other teams in the organization. And we talked about that poll that Geert laid out with sort of really set the scene very well. And even though communicate is at the very end of this process, which I guess lines up with the obligation to transparently report and communicate the story, communication is really embedded through all of this process as well. So that's just a kind of a brief overview. And I think what I really want to lay out here is that this is now also a framework that we're working on. Hopefully by the end of the year, this will be available as a usable template for anyone, and we're going to make that available.
So Damian, sorry, you mentioned that that you've used, you based it on things like ISO 2012-1 and kind of established frameworks. So does that mean like throughout so is it a 4-year program that you've got this time? So throughout that program, are you doing like a plan, do, review, kind of checking constantly, so that by the time you actually hit the water for the ocean race itself, you're kind of established in how you're going to do things and how you can improve? And
totally. I mean, I think this is basically, I'll answer, maybe I'll come to your question later on, and maybe we'll revisit it, but totally. I mean, as you know, sustainability is about this cycle of action, tracking, analyzing the progress and looking for improvements in the next cycle. Obviously that fits quite well into an annual cycle of reporting, but we do that on a weekly, monthly and quarterly basis, recognizing challenges, recognizing results and things that we've achieved, and taking those learnings back to the starting point. And so Geert mentioned at the start, you know, when you're building out a sustainability plan, it's a document which is never finished. And you just, well, we'll make up a sustainability plan, it's done. It's not. You're going to have learnings all along the way, and it'll need to be revised on a regular basis. So yes, to sort of briefly answer your question, we are. This document, this slide here, just represents basically a how-to series which we're going to be developing, or we are developing in parallel with the toolbox, which will help practitioners and users of the toolbox to apply and use the framework. And so this is the first of a how-to series which is already published on our website and will guide us through this process. And so for us, we already looked at this in the last webinar, but it's very much, the early stages are very much about defining what are the high-level goals. And I think, Alexandra, last time you talked about you were interested in the transforming manufacturing, so maybe we can dig into that a little bit. Is there anything else that you want to have a look at?
Well, I think you know, they're kind of linked together a little bit. So underneath collaboration, I was really interested in, you know, how you influence your supply chain, because I think that's one of the hardest things for people to control when you're starting off. So you know, I think on the journey, you know, you start quite small, for a lot of sporting organizations, and then you build that up. But as you build it up, you have to work your way down your supply chain to kind of really understand where everything is coming from. And then I guess the other bit was really very much around communication, because I think within the environmental space and sustainability as a whole space, communication has always been a bit of an issue in terms of getting the message out in the appropriate way. So it'd be interesting to know kind of how you guys are tackling those areas.
Yeah, thanks. I think clearly there's a few for us when we're a sport which has a significant technology element to it. And so I know we have someone here from motorsport, so we're in the same boat, so to speak, our car. You know, we can look at some things that our stakeholders find important. You know, single-use plastics is a very popular topic at the moment, and clearly we want to be, to the extent that it's possible, single-use plastic free, and looking and promoting and searching for alternatives. But we also need to look at, clearly, when we look at the sustainable landscape in the context of what we're doing, we need to say, okay, what are the big ticket items here? And for us, travel and logistics is a huge one. So getting our team members, and where we need to, their families around the place, getting the boat around the place, having our sponsors and supporters on site when we can, acknowledging that people traveling to visit the event, we have a part responsibility in that. And obviously that's more specifically, I guess, specific to the ocean race event itself, but we're part of that story. And so how do we optimize, how do we acknowledge, how do we improve that footprint? And then of course the other space is, as you're about to say, is putting the boat on the water. And this is a big thing. We're racing 60-foot boats. There is nothing sort of that comes off the shelf. Everything is specifically designed and built and rebuilt and redesigned to make sure it's the most performant, most optimum, most lightest, fastest component on the boat, most reliable. And there's a lot of resources that go into that. Interestingly enough, we're starting to recognize, as we calculated our footprint for 2019, that the design phase and the use of internet, the use of cloud computing is comprising a significant part of our footprint. We think that the data hasn't been totally calculated yet, but we think it's probably somewhere between 4 and 10% of our footprint is associated with internet use, communications, and cloud computing, whilst we're in this design phase. That's significant, and I think there's a growing awareness that what's up there in the ether isn't free, right? So we're trying to understand from our perspective where our responsibility lies there and how we can optimize that, and at least to recognize it and to compensate for the unavoidable footprint. In terms of the manufacturing space, clearly it's the materiality and the material and utility flows that come into that process. As we build a 60-foot boat, typically out of carbon, how can we improve on that? Can we change materials, optimize manufacturing processes? As we order sails from a sail maker, do we understand what component is cloud computing, what component is plastics and laminates, and how is it shipped to us? And so we're reaching out to basically the process. It's quite involved, but very important and very fundamental is understanding who your stakeholders are, who your suppliers are, and where this circle in the middle there kind of represents our sort of nominal area of responsibility in the scope of our program. And that's you know, as we look at our list of suppliers, which goes into the hundreds and thousands, we need to decide where we're going to focus our efforts.
Okay, and then I guess the next question from that is like, how do you engage those stakeholders? Because that's what people really want to know. They want, you know, tools wise, like how are you guys engaging? You know, if you were to break it down for us.
Yeah, so I think I'm just trying to get to the next slide. There we go. So I think there's another slide actually which represents that quite well. Let me just see if, all over the place. Going back, Garrett, how can we go back here? Can you drop me back a couple of slides there, mate? There we go. So maybe we just go back one more slide, to be honest. It's very much about making sure that we're listening. I think we need to ask the right questions. And don't be afraid to ask the questions because people are ready for them now. Honestly, you know, every door we open, every time we send an email or a phone call, hi, we're 11th Hour Racing Team. We're spending a certain amount of money with you, or you're providing us with products and services. We'd like to explore the sustainability space. You know, and can you tell us a little bit about your company and what you're doing, and if there's something that we can work together on, especially as it pertains to the delivery of those products and services to us. So, I mean, typically when you pull a dollar, you know, ultimately we're on this end of the scale, we're consumers. So when we pull a dollar out of our pocket, this is the opportunity to spend it and to apply sustainable sourcing in a mindful way. We're basically saying to the supplier, we like what you're giving to us. We like how you built it and who built it. We agree with the way you had it built. We like the materials. We like the way you packaged, and we agree with the way you're shipping it to us. And oh, by the way, we really appreciate the end of life plan that you have embedded in the product. And so they're the questions we're asking. Typically, some of those boxes haven't been even explored. And interestingly enough, I think one of the polling questions Garrett has, if you remember, was, does your company have a sustainability program, and do you recognize that it exists? In many cases, we find that actually the person we might be speaking to go, I don't think we have one. I don't think we're doing anything in this space. And then when we dig in, even look on their website, you go, oh, actually, we're compensating for our carbon footprint. That means someone must be tracking all this data. There's something happening. And so that's a kind of a good example, I guess, of sustainability being applied, maybe top down or whatever, but not reaching out through the organization. And so we're finding that these conversations are opening people's eyes. And in many cases, 1 + 1 makes 3. We're finding that by asking these questions, having the conversation, listening to what they're saying, we're coming up with new solutions and certainly improving our team's impact as we source and look for supplies.
Damian, can I just ask you a question here? Just going back one step to the start is this is great. This is a framework, gives a lot of direction. But what we often learn a lot from are our mistakes. And some of us might be perfect, but I'm sure you have made some mistakes. So happy to hear that you're not perfect, because then I can ask my question. Can you share something that you said, okay, that's a lesson learned from the beginning. We were not in full swing. We were about to get started, or we were just getting started. And this is something we did that we learned our lesson. that could be useful for some of us on the call who are kind of in the early phase?
Yeah, I think there's two things that spring to mind. One is that in the sustainability space, people are, certain sector having an increasingly growing awareness and knowledge in this space. And therefore, because we're in it, we assume that others have at least a basic understanding, and that's wrong. We need to explain the landscape to our stakeholders. We need to discover it together. And the assumption that we have our assumptions are typically not always right either. And so there are parts of the landscape that we're discovering as we reach out to our stakeholders. And the other thing here, I think, especially in the context of sport, which is timeline specific, is that you're always up against the timeline. And so when we decide, for instance, that we want to change manufacturing using alternative materials and, oh, by the way, we need it in 6 months' time, there's a reality check there. So basically, producer, supplier will come and go, well, actually, when we're beta testing or coming up with new design, it's a 2-year process. And that's just to get it off the drawing board and into the manufacturing facility where we need to build new tools. And so it's a long journey, and we need to consider timeline always has to be part of the conversation. I mean, money, of course, but yes. Time.
Time. Just related to that, and if anyone else has a question about like how do you get started, etc., because I think we have lots of things to discuss, but I want to make sure we cover that. I got a question here from Nicolette Berends. You can see it probably in the chat box, who you know from Cape Town. She said, "What if your projects are short on the time period and in a space where there is no data other than we think should be? How do you start?"
How do we, I'm just reading the same question. So how do we start? Well, I think first of all, it's really about recognizing what we're doing and understanding the scope. So is it mom and dad driving kids around to some regattas in the summer? If it's an international team building a boat, putting it on the water, entering the America's Cup, is it a company that's setting up to build boats or enter supplying material for building ice hockey sticks or whatever it is? You need to define clearly what you're doing, and then honestly look at the responsibility and the impacts. It's not just about picking up single-use plastic off the beach. That is part of it. But it's really, I think, understanding the broad picture of what we're doing and recognizing that sustainability is about looking for opportunities through every time we pull out our wallet and spend $1. Every time we engage with someone, interact with someone, every time we make a decision or apply an action, we need to be mindful. We need to apply conscious consumerism at every stage. Alexandra, anything else that you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think it's just about prioritizing as well. Like actually, where are you going to have impact? If you're a small club, like actually, what's going to be valuable to you? If you're already potentially struggling on money or something, but actually there are options for you to put in something like solar or to change the way in which you use water. Actually, those are money saving mechanisms for you as well. So there's actually a win-win. You're reducing your carbon footprint, but you're also potentially saving, for a one-off expenditure, you're saving for the long term. So actually, I think really being quite, you can be quite cutthroat, especially if you're a small entity. I think, you very much have to say, how am I going to make my biggest gains? Because everybody wants to win at the end of the day. You don't want to just do a project which is going to take forever and that you don't know what the outcome is going to be. But so I think finding those projects that are really going to give you those gains, especially short term, because that spurs actually the longer term projects to start happening more easily and to get more buy-in.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because at the end of the day, even at the corporate level, there's no obligation to act on everything. It's typically impossible, even for, and especially for, big organizations. And certainly, so we shouldn't be afraid to set clear boundaries and say, we are going to work on this. and we cannot work on this time, but we'll look at it in the future. And so making those first steps, getting out into the landscape. And then I think what's important in this process of measure, assess, take action, and inspire is taking the time to, once you've taken action and kind of measured what you've done, to take a 10,000 foot level, to take a vantage point and say, okay, this is what we've achieved. And okay, we can improve on that, and we can maybe bring in some other aspects or sectors that we feel that we can influence or have a responsibility for. Makes sense, yeah. Little steps to big ones.
Yeah, I think breaking it down is always super important in terms of setting the goals for the long-term objective.
This slide here really, I guess, represents the benchmarking. And, you know, when we have, so the part of the question was, you know, the lack of data. And so there is data that exists. Where it does exist, we need to use it. And so for a sailing team, this is quite hard because typically it's a one-off campaign. We're very lucky to be in, I guess, into a, you know, 4th to 8th years, more actually, 6th to 8th or 9th year cycle with Mark and Charlie's campaigns. And so benchmarks established from some initial tracking with Alpha Medica, which track typically the logistical aspect of entering the ocean race. We built on that with Vestas 11th Hour Racing and included this, we expanded the scope of what we were doing and what we were tracking to measure waste, to measure all materials and expenditures that went in and out of the campaign. We included the hospitality aspect of our partners and those engagements and travel thereof. And that gave us an overall footprint, which, as you can see, is significant, but in the context of a global race, putting a boat in the water and moving and sailing 20 people and more around the world, it's in scale. And so our challenge now for the next campaign is to look more clearly at the footprint of putting a boat on the water and on the racetrack. This is, you know, one of the direct results of that is going to be able to influence policy at the class and boat builder designer level. And so I talked about timeline and some of the challenges. And so we're not going to be arriving on the start line with a hemp boat or with a bamboo mast and win the ocean race. That's not possible with the technology and the time that we have. However, we will be able to make some significant new changes in innovation and technology. And most importantly, we'll be able to measure what's possible as a real project with the real challenges that everyone else has, and embed them hopefully in policies going forward. So that's the process we're in, and we're bringing in external partners to help us with issues like water footprinting, understanding what the embedded footprint, the embedded water footprint is of what we're doing. Clearly tracking obviously waste and carbon footprint as well, which is I guess the best indicator of our overall footprints, but there are many.
I guess one question, so coming from sailing and from a sailing series as well, is what are you doing with regards to your on-water support teams? So because that obviously plays in quite heavily into your, and so when I'm saying that to like other sports, what I mean is that for every boat that, you know, for their race boats, they also have a race support boat, which will be at most of their stopovers, which will be usually a rib and will be using a combustion engine. So I guess that's, yeah, in terms of, you know,
I've got a couple of questions for you on that as well, because I think there's some good technology within the Sail GP circuit, but I can certainly talk quickly about what we're doing. And so this slide, I guess, is very much about manufacturing, but does of course represent the whole sort of community of human resources, which puts us there in the first place.
Yeah.
The boats we're racing are sailed with less and less athletes. I think we're down to 5 or 6 now. But behind that, almost by default, the kind of support team grows. And our typical support team, from an administration and management through the technical team and support team, sail designers and builders and boat builders, is typically around 20. For our specific internal team, and that doesn't include specific boat yards and people who are part of other contracting companies that help us to get on the water. So, you know, we're in even one tier down, we're easily up to like 100 people. We need to get some of these people to the stopovers, and so that's where the logistical part of sailing, the logistical support of sailing, is something that we need to look at very clearly. And especially, you know, obviously the last 6 months has helped us to redefine what is necessary in terms of travel. The internet use has gone up, obviously, but you know, so there's a balance to be found there. Yeah, so hopefully that answers it to a certain extent. And in terms of on the water support, yes, we have ribs, we have a certain amount of material and transport that we need to get around the place. One of the solutions that's been applied for the ocean race in the past is to have joint combined services for teams, which has a huge impact in reducing the overall footprint. And so that's a space that, that has had a lot of support, or, you know, has had a lot of positive impact in the past. And I think probably Sail GP runs a similar template. So maybe you could describe that to us. And one question I had is, apparently you guys have mark laying drones. So unlike racing a car around a track, we need to go out and put buoys to establish a racetrack on the ocean. So have you guys got technology assisting you now rather than having ribs on the water?
We are using technology at our junior race level, which is it's a product called MarkSetBot, which is really interesting. So basically somebody can literally sit on one boat or on the land, depending on the proximity of a race course. And they've got these little basically floating marks that have electric batteries that we can charge off of solar or any sort of renewable source. And they have a little motor, and you literally just GPS coordinates set, send them out to the race course, and that's it. And they like, it's the most bizarre thing to watch, but phenomenal. And so I think, you know, it will be interesting to see how that provides for, you know, racing as a whole across the entirety of sailing, and as well as the fact that just using that same sort of concept for other sports as well, you know, where it might be a possibility. So
I guess we're seeing less helicopters and more drones. It's another in the air, so that's another example, right?
Yeah, it's basically just trying to harness technology to kind of replace some of those areas where we're having high carbon impacts. I think what would be really interesting, is to know a bit about kind of the legacy program. One question, I know that we're running low on time, but one question I sort of had in that area was obviously the times that we're living in at the moment. You know, we're facing a lot, especially around the Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, and very much looking at how are we delivering diversity and inclusion across the sport of sailing. Doesn't have a great, is not doing very well on the matter, and you know, has a long way to go. Not that it isn't on the radar. And I was just curious, how are you guys delivering that? Because that's very relevant to all sports who will be on this call today.
Yeah, I think that's good timing, because it's very much about the engagement and outreach piece. And so we've talked about working internally with our team and externally with our partners. And we do that through very many platforms. I guess the Ocean Hour Network is about training up our own internal team and using that then as a way of reaching out to our partners, and to create a team of ambassadors who are familiar with the language. And so in terms of the makeup of the team, there's an element which is obviously included in the race rules, which creates is a shift towards gender equity within the ocean race, and that's part of World Sailing's push to achieve a gender equity within. I don't remember the exact time scale, but I think it's
I think it's on the
2030, right? Yeah. So there's a clear push within sailing towards that. And in terms of diversity, I mean, clearly there's a lot to be done. The advantage that we have as an ocean race team, as a world platform, is that we work in so many different countries, and so we already have an existing program which brings basically local employment into our team at every stopover. We did that in the last 2 campaigns, and we'll certainly be building that in this next campaign. So that's a great way for us to, I guess, increase the social community support aspect of our team and of sailing, and hopefully that leaves some young inspired youth behind us, or I mean, we've seen an amazing change in Itajaí, southern Brazil. They've taken on sailing as a community, and there's a lot of ocean race events now that go into this small town in southern Brazil, and it's just so welcoming. And we really do see a shift in acknowledgement and engagement with sailing in the local sailing school when we're there. And so we hope that kind of model we can replicate at other stopovers. In some places it's easier than others, but we need to keep working in that space. And in the other space, I think we're really lucky as a team to have 11th Hour Racing, and they provide us the opportunity to support local organizations with a grant legacy program at either every country, region, or stopover that we go to, typically 2 a year at the moment. And so it provides us as an ocean race team on a world sailing platform to use this tool, this platform, to elevate some of these organizations that are doing amazing work in ocean conservation, community and marine community support. And so that's a great space for us to work in the and to improve this subject of inclusivity and diversity, and something that will be that'd be one of the decision making aspects, I guess, as to how we will decide who we will work with, is to what's the makeup of the organization. But clearly that's a strong space, or an important space for us to work in. And the other one is that we have a youth engagement internship program. And so we've just started that process. We currently have a local intern in Brittany in France who's working with the development process that we're embedding, getting a race boat on the water. And so he's helping us within the sustainability department at this stage. But that internship program will be hopefully spreading throughout our team, whether it's opportunities in the boatyard or in administration or logistics, or having access to sailing and sailors. And so that's another opportunity for us to serve the underprivileged, basically. And where at the end of the day, sailing on one end is about redistributing wealth and opportunity, and we really see ourselves as a vehicle for that. So
yeah,
I think everyone is taking notes and listening to your conversation. You're firing off questions to each other. I just want to be respectful of the time, and also tell those who are on this call that we will share this slide deck so that you can also follow up on some of the things that we've been addressing. There's probably, just in order to wrap up, and then you both can take a 30 seconds for a final kind of key message. But there's just one question that probably one of you can address fairly briefly. Will the 11th Hour Race have physically challenged sailors on board for the upcoming ocean race? Who wants to answer that one? That's a yes or a no, probably.
Well, I'm not part of the 11th Hour Racing team. So I'm just the physically challenged one around here. So,
Damian, do you know?
I guess if I understand the question, or as my interpretation of the question is there a physical training program associated with preparing for the race?
So I think it's more, do we have people with disabilities, for example?
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and certainly, I think in the context of the ocean race, and the boats we're racing at the moment, that would be extremely difficult, to be honest. I maybe leave Alexandra to disagree with me or agree with me, but personally, as an able-bodied professional sailor who's trying to stay fit, I find that the boats now are almost inhumane in terms of the demand on the body and the demand on staying healthy and safe on the boat. And I think in the current format of the boats, it would be extremely difficult to have someone with disabilities on board. But again, there's a perfect example at the moment. There's an ocean race going on, which is in the IMOCA class, and one of the participants is missing a hand, Damian Foxall.
I was going to say, so Damian is is campaigning for Vendée.
Right. So it's I guess it's very much about the scale of the disability, right?
Yeah. So I think that's basically what it comes down to. I think for the intensity of something like the ocean race, it would depend. So Damian Foxall, who has his forearm missing on one of his arms, who is a multi-Paralympic medalist and has done some like unbelievable things, and is campaigning for the Vendée Globe, which is a around the world, single-handed around the world race currently. And I'm pretty sure that he will actually be at the start line at the end of the year. So, or if it's moved, I have no idea. But yeah, so I think it's just depends on how extreme. I don't foresee myself being on a boat going doing the ocean race personally at the moment anytime soon.
We got to get out. We got to get you out for sale though. That's a no-brainer.
Well, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say no.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I think we slowly have to draw it to a close. What we do have and what we will include is some specific resources that we collected primarily by the 11th Hour Racing team to say like this is useful material for you who are on this sustainability journey. So we'll share this. A very specific question from Ziga here, Damian, is it possible to get more information about the youth engagement program you referred to? Is it something we can add here when we share?
Yes, we can certainly, or I can contact them directly with regards to various aspects of the youth engagement program. The objective is to have an intern placement or multiple intern placements throughout various phases of the campaign. It's very important to us.
Okay, excellent. So on that note, thank you very much, both of you, Damian, Alexandra. Always getting excited about sailing at the heart of the sustainability program. We should not forget that we're kind of sport lovers. We're crazy about whatever sport we are representing here. And that's why we're so passionate about making sure that we do this in the right manner to make sure we can continue to enjoy our sport and have the impact that we seek to have. So thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for the last 2 sessions actually that you did, for the conversations, for the insights you shared. Thank you all of you who were on this call for your questions and your contributions. And I look forward to seeing you at a next event from SandSI. Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Alexandra. Thanks, Gert.
Bye, Damien. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Gert.
Bye-bye.